here today not to speak as a lawyer, because I'm a lawyer. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And I'm also what I consider to be an international lawyer because of my experience with Total in France. But what I would really like to talk about in my capacity today is as Tracy Vivian Odipo and my experience in the energy industry. Okay, so given my background in this industry, and that is after I moved to Paris to pursue my master's in international business law, I ended up working as an M&A lawyer with Total, mergers and acquisitions, within their gas, renewables, and power department. So I was mainly based in renewables, and I have a lot of knowledge that I've acquired around this area, and more specifically in what is called today as carbon neutrality. So a lot of our presenters today have talked about renewable projects, have talked about renewable subjects and what we are doing to move from what we call traditional forms of generating energy to the modern energy that now we are in right now. And so one of the things that they haven't really pointed out is the fact that we're not just going to be all swapped in this, transition at once. It's really progressive. It's not something that will just be done immediately. And over the span of time, you will see that we still, to some extent, which is the reality today, that we still need fossil fuels to generate electricity and other forms of energy. So against the backdrop of all this is the reality that is within the energy industry, because it has contributed a lot to what is now today the crisis in global warming, the climate crisis. And so we're going to see how most countries, especially the developed countries and the developing countries, how they're embracing all this, and what we can do together to realize to produce energy, but still not to harm the environment. So as a lawyer in Total, one of the main issues that we have seen, and even as an industry, is that the oil industry has really has influenced a lot of impact on the climate crisis. And it's, to a lot of people, it's seen as an enemy to the society, that we only think about what we are generating from this, our revenues, our businesses, as opposed to actually our health as human beings and how we're going to overcome this issue of climate crisis. But when you look at it very closely, actually we are part of the solution, and if not, we are actually the main solution to this crisis. We don't talk about us as consumers of electricity and how we're driving this industry to produce energy at all costs so that we can operate our machines, so we can move around. This is not something that people actually get to ask themselves. How do you eventually get to have energy in your house if it's not for Total, if it's not for Shell, if it's not for any other oil company in the world? We see it from the problem of others and not the problem ourselves. So we should look at it from what are the solutions we as consumers of this product are going to bring into the market, as opposed to blaming them, that they're the main cause of climate crisis at the moment. So I will talk about how this industry has prepared over the years to mitigate the climate issue. And I also talk about one concept that, especially for Total, that it came up with that can help to mitigate this factor, even as we transition from traditional forms of energy to the modern day energy. So one of these things that most of the companies abroad and most of the governments have come up with is actually a technology that's called CCUS. CCUS stands for Carbon Capture and Utilization Storage. And this is a chain of technology that is used by energy companies in the world when they're engaged in the production of energy. For instance, if it's geothermal energy, you need really a lot of fuel, a lot of energy to power this plant so that you can, at the end of the day, have energy being generated from these plants. But are they really using clean energy to come out to eventually have energy for the consumers? No, this is not the case, because we need, if we were to move from renewable, we were to use renewable energy to power these sites, it means we really need a lot of it, which at the moment is not the case, because we haven't scaled up to that level that would allow most oil and gas companies to power their plants. And the CCUS concept is that, yes, we actually acknowledge the fact that we are using fossil fuels to power our stations, to power our projects, but it's a technology that utilizes a certain concept where before carbon is actually emitted into the air, it's captured. Either it's captured and sequestrated. By sequestration, I mean it's compressed into a certain gas or form that can be pumped underground, so that eventually we don't have these emissions, we don't have the GHG gases being emitted into the atmosphere and causing a lot of emissions into the air. And also, this CCUS concept is actually utilized in the sense that it can be converted into other products like lubricants, like plastics, and other forms of energy that can be utilized, as opposed to just letting it into the air to harm the environment. So this is one concept that I think, if it's employed into the Kenyan energy industry, would be really, really forward-looking. It would be really good for the market, and we can still be able to generate electricity even with the use of fossil fuels before we finally move to clean energy in the meantime, and still take care of the environment. So what are the renewable energy sources? So our previous presenters have highlighted some of the current renewable energy sources that we're using globally, and even here in Kenya, like wind power. We have solar PVs. We have biofuels. And these are just some of the examples of the renewable energy sources at the moment. And also we have, these are the only energy sources that we have at the moment. So I'm just going to show you this illustration on how the world has really evolved from fossil fuels until currently where we are at the moment. And this is something that I've used to explain how the reality of the issue is that we are not really ready to disrupt the current oil energy situation, but it will take a time. It's a progressive issue. And when you look at how coal has been used globally, and even up to this point, you'll see that over the years, it's not just been eliminated from the industry from one go. It's taken really centuries of time, if not even more than 3 centuries, to be honest. And you can see that as of 2016, coal at a global level is actually under -0. So it means that we have really progressed in terms of using clean energy. And when we look at the use of oil, for instance, you will see that we didn't have oil in the beginning, and in the 19th century, in the 18th century, between 1750 and 1800, and the evolution of oil even up to this point is also slowing down as opposed to how it began. And if we look at the renewable energy sources, for instance, the biomass, and I mean the hydro and the solar energy, they're taking up the spaces that were initially occupied by the traditional energy sources. So it's really a progressive thing. It's not something that we can move from just today and say, okay, now we need to switch to clean energy as opposed to the traditional forms of energy. This picture was taken from the AIE, the International Energy Agency. AI something. Yeah, so just in case you think I came up with it, it's not my own. So what are the energy measures doing? So having worked for Total for 1 year, I have seen a lot of activities that they have done that are actually in line with the climate targets that France as a country has committed itself to fulfill within a certain duration of time. And this is not something that we have in Africa yet, even if we were to talk about our regional organizations like the EU and how the EU has engaged its member states to address the issue of climate change, like it's been done in the EU. The European Union came up with this directive, it's called the RED II, Renewable Energy Sources Directive, and they had the red one, and now they have the RED II, which is more inclusive, because initially the red one didn't have the transport industry. But we're talking about mobility today, and for a country like France, they have targets like 14% of their energy sources must come from renewable energy, and this is something that they were supposed to realize by 2020. And so yeah, we're in 2020, and I'm sure they'll give a report on this to the European Commission on how they've gone about this. And the same applies to the CCUS, which is the concept I'm explaining to you, that even in as much as you're burning fossil fuels to generate power, you have the carbon capture, utilization, storage that can actually sequestrate the carbon emissions before they can get into the air. And you still get to save the planet as you generate revenues for your company. And for Total as a company, they have really good targets they put up so that by the year 2025, through the affiliates, like we have here, the SAFT, Quadha, and SunPower, these are affiliates of Total that engaged in renewable energy projects and mostly deal with either batteries that use renewable energy, or SunPower, that is a company that sets up solar PVs, and they generate a lot of electricity because the projects are really large. And by 2025, they have a target of 25 gigawatts of this that they target to produce in renewable energies. So this is really good, given that this really portrays the picture of what France is, because it's the national oil company, and the government has one of the biggest equity shares in this company, and you can see that they have plans to use renewable energies, replace it with traditional sources of energy. So what's the advantage of using traditional, modern sources of energy as opposed to traditional sources of energy? So here I just explained something to do with when we use coal, when we burn fossil fuels, it takes up a lot of space. It takes up we emit a lot of gases just for very few. 1 minute. So for instance, for you to really power a station using coal, only around 40% of that energy content in the material can be captured as electricity. Yet if we use renewable sources, it actually comes out as electricity instantly. It's not the same as where you have to use another method or another process, industrial process, to produce the final product. So this is why renewable energies is really the good way to go. So we've had a lot of feelings, a lot of people expressing their views about this transition. Like someone asked, where are we going to dispose all these traditional, all these cars that were were fueled differently now that we were moving to EVs. And these are just some of the issues that people are raising. And some of the challenges is that people are not really ready to deal with this. And because it's a mindset, you need to change the society, you need to drive the clients, the consumers into believing that really this is the best option to go for, as opposed to traditional use of other modes of mobility. And lastly, so this is what I started with, and I will not really talk much about it because I'm out of time. So it's the concept of CCUS, and what I've been explaining, that instead of burning fossil fuels completely, we can actually instill the carbon capture and sequestration method so that we can control the emissions into the air. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time.